I am still wrestling with trying to condense the complexity of this book into the one message. I think there are two or three. One is that beauty, grace, and joy are always with us, even at the hardest times, and sometimes because of the hardest experiences. Probably that's the main. But also, reading this book will give you tools and strength and confidence to go through something like this, even though what the specifics of your journey will be different from mine. But I wrote this in hopes that it will give you those specific tools by seeing what we went through and getting to think about it and getting to say, oh, when something like that happens to me, I'm going to be more prepared. Maybe I won't do what Tony did, but I'll be more prepared. And also the confidence that it can come out well, despite how horrible it seems. And also the belief that being able to hold someone's hand while they depart this world is not a tragedy, but it's actually a beautiful gift.
Everybody, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter. Glad to have everybody with us today. On the podcast today, we have Tony, and he's written a book, Carrying the Tiger. It's a memoir, and we're going to be talking about living with cancer, dying with grace, and finding joy while grieving. And I'm excited to have Tony here to talk about his story, the story of his lovely partner, and kind of how he got to here as an author. So, Tony, welcome to Living the Next Chapter. Glad to have you here.
Oh, thank you, David. I'm really excited to be here.
Excellent. Tell everybody, Tony, where are you in this great big world of ours?
I am in New York City on the island of Manhattan, although not the part that you usually see in, TV shows and movies. I actually wouldn't want to live there any more than most people would. I'm in a nice residential neighborhood, uptown Manhattan, near Columbia University, with a view of the Hudson River outside my window.
Sounds nice. Been down there many times. Love that part of the world. Great people, great, it feels like you're walking on a movie set everywhere you go. It's just like, oh my gosh. So, and as a Canadian, I love it. Yeah.
And me too. And just yesterday, our street was full of trucks because they're shooting an episode of Law and Order SVU in our neighborhood this week.
There you go. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So you might get on camera, hey, we should get you on there. You could be the star of the show. I love that.
I'll carry my book out in front of me, so it makes it onto the show.
Yeah, just hold it up. That's good. I love it. Tony, tell everybody a little bit about your author journey. I'm always curious to find out where our author guests have started from to get to where they are today. What was it for you as a young author that got you interested in writing?
Young author in the figurative sense. I'm actually fairly far along in my life journey. I loved writing as a young man, and I did, in fact, 40 years ago, just out of college, wrote a book. Failed to get it published, and then fell in love with other activities during the time that my agent was sending that book around. 40 years later, after having done many other things, my wife, Lynn, was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, non-smoker's lung cancer, which is how this book started. But I didn't think of it as a book. I was writing posts on CaringBridge to keep our friends informed. It's just CaringBridge is a nonprofit website that you can use if you're in a health kind of crisis to communicate with your friends. And I had no expectation that these posts would eventually become a book. But our process went on for 7 or 8 years. Through various twists and turns. I became increasingly invested in sharing the news day to day or week by week, what was happening. And friends kept saying, Tony, your posts are amazing. I really love reading these. You're helping me so much. And I kept writing. Through the years when Lynn was in and out of hospital, and then the rather special period of hospice, and then my deep grief afterwards. And somewhere along the line, enough people said, this is really helping me, that I began to think, maybe I should turn these things into a book. And that's where the idea came from.
What was that original book 40 years ago? What was that about?
That was a romance I set out. I loved thrillers. I had read a ton of thrillers. I was in my 20s. I thought, I'll just write a thriller, just like all these other people. And actually, my brother was a published author at the time. Why not? I'm a good writer. So I set out to write a thriller, and I just could not come up with a good enough plot. I don't have the head that a good mystery or thriller writer has to have. And after a few months, I said, wait a minute. At least I've got a good subplot. I got the romance subplot between my two characters, and romances are selling like hotcakes. Why don't I just throw out the thriller part and write the romance? Which I did. And I got an agent. It was pretty well written, and I got an agent, and he sent it around. But it had a fatal flaw, which the first publisher we sent it to told me about. This is almost like a fairy story. I get an agent, we send it out. The first publisher sends back a letter saying, this is really good. It's almost good enough. But like your central characters aren't as interesting as the secondary characters.
Oh.
Like, they didn't say it this way, but give them some flaws. Make them more like real, make your central woman more like a real person with some flaws and issues that she has to overcome, not just the plot. And send it back to us. And I said to my agent, I love this advice. I agree with them. I see what they're saying, and I'll do it. And he said, don't be silly. The next publisher we send it to might pay you to make those changes. This is just like the fairy tale where they line up all the women in the world for the prince or whoever it is with the most beautiful one first, and he can't go backwards. At the end of that fairy tale, actually, he kisses like the little old lady at the end, and she turns out to be a princess, and there's a happy ending. But in my case, I never got as good a rejection letter as that.
Wow.
There never was anyone else who was willing to say that. And but during that same year, I fell in love with computer programming. Go figure. And became a software developer. What can you do? It called to me.
So what I find interesting in that story is you are a new author with 40 years of experience, right? Having had that information in that book already done and putting it out in the world. It's an interesting way to kind of come into the story of your book today. But knowing that you have that in your background, that's very interesting.
Well, thank you. I never thought of it that way, but I think that's right. I also was a filmmaker back then. During the period when I wrote the book, I was a professional filmmaker. I was making documentary-style movies for colleges and universities. Did very well at it and won a bunch of awards for these small films. Big fish in a small pond. These are the kind of awards that no one ever hears about, like Best College Film of the Year kind of award. But I won those things. I was pretty good at it, but they didn't pay. Thought I would write a book. That didn't turn out paying anything, and discovered that I was good at writing software, and that did pay. I was about 30 at the time, and that changed my direction.
Tell us more about Lynn. I want to know Lynn. I want to know more about her, your relationship, how you met. Like, can you tell us more about her?
Absolutely. Lynn was genuinely a very special person, a bit unusual. She was an artist, a painter. When I met her, I was 29, she was 39, was living in a very small walk-up apartment that she had converted into her painting studio. Basically, most of it was now a painting studio, and she slept in this tiny little bedroom in the back, and working as a waitress during the day to support her painting habit. Waitress at night. Working as a waitress at night to support her painting habit. And I ran into her. So I had been married. I was married in my 20s and was just getting a divorce and was in the rebound period. And I was like looking back, I was trying to prove to myself that I was still attractive. So I was talking to women. I'm a shy guy. But during that year, I was talking to women that I met online somewhere or whatever. And in this case, Lynn and I swam in the Columbia University swimming pool during the same slot each day. So I kept seeing her in the water without really thinking about her. And one day, she was like on the wrong side of me. I mean, you get used to what lane you swim in. And I just blurted out as she passed in front of me, why were you swimming in that lane? You usually swim in this other lane. And she said, I was kicking. So she had gone to a slower lane. And the very next day, or the next time I swam, there she was at the end of the lane that I was in doing leg stretches. And so I stopped and talked to her. And only later did I discover that she had been so surprised by this total stranger talking to her in the swimming pool that she decided I must be madly attracted to her. And she had deliberately stopped at the end of the lane and done those leg stretches to catch my attention and give me a chance to talk to her. Whereas I was talking to everyone. Yeah. I mean, I thought she looked cute, but it wasn't that special. So I stopped, I talked to her, and during that first conversation, or maybe it was the second one, she said something that just caught me. We were talking about, hey, maybe it would be fun to get together out of here, not wearing bathing caps. And we're talking about when might that happen? And I said, well, I'm free every night this week except Wednesday when I volunteer for the Rape Crisis Intervention Program at St. Luke's Hospital, which was in our neighborhood. And without missing a beat, she looked at me and she said, oh, so you stay home on Wednesday nights and nobody gets raped? Which it takes you a minute to get it. And a lot of my friends, when I've told that joke, don't get it. Basically, here I am. She's in her second ever conversation with me, and she makes a joke, which the premise of which is, oh, so you must be a rapist, and by staying home, you protect all the other women that night.
Wow.
And I found it funny. And I found her incredibly clever and brave, and unlike anyone I had ever talked to be willing to say such a thing. And looking back, I realized that's when I started to fall for her. It happened she was about to have her very first solo painting exhibition on Thursday night of the same week and invited me to come. I mean, along with many other people. So I went to the opening and we went out afterwards, and that was the start of our relationship.
Amazing. I love putting some character pieces behind Lynn so that we have kind of a better appreciation of her as we're reading the book too, right? I think that kind of helps us to see a little bit more about her. When did the diagnosis and the cancer journey start for Lynn? What time frame are we looking at here?
We're looking at 2014.
Okay.
So just over 10 years ago now, coming on towards 11. She was in her 60s. I was in my 50s. She had quit all of her part-time job type stuff in order to devote herself to painting full-time. And then she started having these weird indigestion, digestive symptoms over that summer. And we had by then traveled, we'd done all these amazing trips to India, places like that, where you can pick up stomach bugs and weird amoeba and things, although we hadn't been in a few years at that point. But she went to her doctors, and at first they were screening her for that, like some bug got into your intestinal tract, and then they tried scoping her, and they were looking at everything basically from her belly button down for about 4 months as she was eating less and less because she couldn't enjoy her food and losing weight. And during that same summer, she started to mention, oh, I also have this little pain in my back, this little backache. And the first few times she said it to any of her doctors, who were very good doctors, they said, oh, that's probably what we call referred pain, where something's going on somewhere in your body, but it manifests as a pain somewhere else. It's probably one of these things we're looking for manifesting in your back. And over the summer, it got worse and worse until finally, at the swimming pool, I'm just laughing because of that swimming pool was the center of our lives. Another friend said, my son is a neurosurgeon. And I know it's just the proud mother in me talking, but he's a really good neurosurgeon. Why don't you go see him about this thing in your back? So she went to our friend's son, and he ordered a routine MRI. And a few days later, on a Sunday, the phone rang, and it was our GP calling because he had received the report from the MRI and said, Lynn, you got tumors in your back and in your lungs. And that was September 28th, 2014, when we got that phone call.
Wow.
And our lives turned upside down.
And to be a non-smoking related cancer, lung cancer, that seems so outside of what I would think of a normal cancer diagnosis. That just seems like it comes from nowhere. Where does it even come from? Right?
It is just like any other of the cancers you can get which aren't associated with a particular behavior. And
Right.
I deliberately say non-smoking lung cancer every time because so many people have an association of lung cancer with smoking, and then they get this overlay of, oh, well, she brought it on herself. Which,
Right.
by the way, I consider unfair, even if it is smoking-related lung cancer. That's a whole other story. But something like half of all lung cancer is what they call non-smokers' lung cancer.
Okay.
It's actually a different chemical they knew from the minute they saw it, oh, we call this non-smokers' lung cancer. And millions of people get it. And it's just like any other cancer where you never quite know why you got it.
So when you sat down to collect all of your thoughts and your writings to pull together Carrying the Tiger, what was it for you when you started thinking about the title for this book? Like, how'd you know what to name this book?
That's a really good question. I struggled for months and was about 3/4 of the way through writing the book, giving it names that ranged from the prosaic, like, oh, living with cancer, or something with love and grief and things like that in the title. And meanwhile, there is actually an anecdote in the book, and it was there that whole time, having to do with carrying the tiger. And one day, I was out riding my bike in a beautiful place, not thinking about the book at all, when it just struck me like a slap your forehead kind of thing. Oh my God, that's the title of the book. Of course it is. Carrying the Tiger refers very specifically to a Tai Chi move or action. I don't practice Tai Chi. A friend had sent Lynn an email early on saying, in our Tai Chi group, we carry a tiger to help a friend who's in trouble and needs help. The act of, or the 3 moves of lifting the tiger and putting it far away on a mountaintop make the tiger seem less scary, and you're more able to deal with what you confront. And Lynn wrote back to her friend, I love that. Could you teach me how to carry tigers? And wow. So I thought of that. In fact, it was the title of the chapter that it sat in. And the end of that chapter was this little anecdote because I thought it was so powerful. And then I realized later on, the book expanded over our lives. It became Living with Cancer, and then Hospice and Dying with Grace.
Right.
And then it talks about my grief afterwards and finding joy while grieving. Those are the subtitles. And I realized that, in a sense, each of those is a different challenge. How do you do this? How do you learn to die with grace or find joy while grieving? And each of them required, in a way, carrying a tiger in its own way. And oh my gosh, that was the title. And I also love the fact that I have a title for the book that makes people wonder, where the heck did that title come from?
Yeah.
As opposed to the ones, I had pages of notes filled with all of these titles. I kept trying them and printing them on the cover page of my manuscript. 1 week it would be one week would be another, and just none of them rang like this.
It inspires curiosity, right? You're like, what is this about?
Yeah.
I love that. I love that you have that. And I love the story behind it as well. Because I think people listening to this, maybe cancer is part of their journey or for their family. And the idea of taking that diagnosis, that thing that's happening to our family, and putting it far away where it feels a little less intimidating.
Yes.
From a distance. I like that separation.
Yes.
That's interesting.
Yeah. I thought so.
So you've written your book into basically three different books in one. It kind of like you've broken it up into 3 different categories, basically, as you've written the book. So is that kind of how you envisioned it from the beginning, that you had 3 kind of separate components, what you were trying to write?
If we define from the beginning as about 18 months ago when I said, I'm going to try making a book out of this.
Okay.
Then the answer is yes. From the minute I started working on the book, which at the time I thought was just going to be an edit of all these CaringBridge posts that I had made. Right. The book itself, the Carrying the Tiger as it came out, is much more than that. And but at the time I thought, okay, I'm going to edit those things. And immediately I saw the first 2, like, okay, the first half of this story is about how we learn to live with cancer. I think of it as living with cancer. Yeah. And then the second half of the story I called Dying. I mean, the second third of the story, because it was about how we came to terms with the fact that Lynn was, in fact, dying, and then how we collaborated to make it a beautiful, positive experience and as good as we could. And we had great luck. That actually is what happened. And then I struggled with what to name the third section of the book, but I knew it was about my grief and coming out of grief. And during this same period, things had happened in my life that brought new joy into my life, which also brought confusion and complexity as I learned to find a place for joy while still deeply grieving Lynn. And so I knew that's what the third part of the book was about, even though it was much longer before I figured out what to call it. But yes, I thought of the book in these three sections, and it is almost like three stories that flow seamlessly one into the next.
During the time when Lynn was going through her journey and writing on Caring Bridge, was she had vision to what was happening on Caring Bridge and kind of what you were writing and people's responses? Was she watching that in real time as well?
Totally.
Okay.
From the very beginning, we agreed mutually. We started writing on Caring Bridge because she wanted to communicate with her friends and had written emails to a bunch of friends. And so many emails were coming in. She had a lot of friends that we couldn't deal with all these separate emails and constantly cutting and pasting the same 2 paragraphs of latest information into 20 different emails. This all, I make it sound like it was a long time. This was in the course of the first week. By the end of that week, we knew we had to do something different. And a friend told us about Caring Bridge. And we went into this model of posting there and letting friends reply there at their convenience. And Lynn was at my shoulder. She said the whole time, she did not want to write these herself. She was perfectly happy to get on the phone and tell a friend or talk on the street, although she really would prefer not even to be talking about cancer when she talked to her friends. She kind of wanted to put the cancer in this place, but put it all there. Let everyone know what was really going on so that she could then have her life not as a cancer patient, but as the Lynn she had always been, and have the same conversations she would have had, knowing that her friends knew what was going on because they read Caring Bridge. I didn't have to constantly ask her. So she would look right over my shoulder. I would write these things, sometimes literally while I was writing, sometimes I'd draft them and then we'd read it together. And then she would have me take things out, because although she wanted people to know, it's like, no. Just because she was having diarrhea and I was writing about the impact on our lives of all this diarrhea, it was a side effect of the drugs, she didn't really want to use that word. She said, just tell them I was uncomfortable. In the book, I've reverted to telling you what really happened, because I think it's really important for the reader of this story to know what really happened. But she would help me, and she would have me take out some references to her pain. No, that's too much. Don't tell them it hurt that much. And she was with it for months, for years. Really until halfway through hospice. I mean, within a week or two of when she died is the last time she was able to read a post.
Wow.
I was reading them to her the first few days of hospice, and she was fading quickly. Hospice only lasted a few weeks. Yeah.
So for those people that were a part of that journey, writing, communicating to you, using Caring Bridge as a way to communicate back to the two of you, do you have any words? Because they might listen to this. After. Do you have any words for them on what that meant to the two of you to have that feedback?
I'm sorry, I kept talking over you. I was so excited this was huge for us.
Yeah.
Huge. Every little thing. If you are reading someone else's Caring Bridge posts,
right,
finding it in you to at least click the little heart button, which is just the Caring Bridge version of like, or even better, write a few words, no matter how prosaic, no matter I'm here for you, or I'm thinking of you. Just the fact that you say, that sounds hard, I'm thinking of you, or fingers crossed, or if you're religious, something about your prayer.
Yeah.
We would publish one of these, and Caring Bridge in those days didn't auto-refresh the way Facebook and all do. We would hit the refresh button starting about 3 minutes after we posted it, because a lot of our friends did sign up to get to get an email.
Yeah.
So about 5 minutes after we posted a post, those friends who were on their phones at that moment or whatever would start replying. And Lynn and I would literally sit by the computer, refreshing the screen again and again, and then clicking the heart button on their comments.
Yeah.
And I'm doing this right now. I mean, this is a whole other thing that has just happened to me, is that at this very minute I am reading CaringBridge posts of someone I know who is in hospital dealing with something very difficult. This only started a couple of weeks ago. In fact, she's got incurable cancer and may not last much longer. And I found this was the first time I'd ever been on the other side.
The other side, yeah.
The other side. And I have found myself in these last few weeks trying to make sure every time. I don't even know her particularly well. She invited me to do this because we had reconnected and she knew about my book. And actually, I sent her a copy of my book, which she has been reading. So I'm not a close friend of hers. I've only had a few conversations with her in my life, but I know what it felt like for me to be on the other side of this exchange and to read people saying, I hear you, I'm with you. And I have been making sure to tell Nancy every time I can, fingers crossed, or that sounds hard, or just, I'm here for you.
It sounds like CaringBridge, in effect, was where you and Lynn put your tiger.
Yes.
Is that where your tiger lived? Yeah.
I think to a large extent, that's where our tiger lived. Not solely, and we both needed more support than that.
Yeah.
She was in a support group. I had a kind of a mini breakdown at one point from the stress of being her caregiver and holding so much in. And I should say, I wasn't writing about me on CaringBridge.
Right. Yeah.
So it may have been more of a tiger for Lynn than it was for me, in the sense that all these feelings that you have as a caregiver and the stress you're under and the weird emotions and thoughts you have that you kind of don't want to tell anyone because, like, I don't want to tell anyone that sometimes I think maybe it would be better if she dies sooner rather than later.
Right.
I deeply love this woman. I'm doing everything I can to extend her life, and yet in the back of my head, every now and then when it got really hard, I would think something like that. And I couldn't say it anywhere, and I sure as heck wasn't putting it in the Lynn Kotula CaringBridge. I ended up getting a therapist, and other people do grief support, do cancer support groups. You need more. But CaringBridge was a huge part of our tiger. And then after Lynn died, everything changed for me. And the section of the book, which part 3, which is now called I Carry Your Heart, but the first chapter of it is called Shattered. And it begins basically the day Lynn dies. I found myself writing on CaringBridge, the kind of journal that you don't usually expect ever to publish about, or what you might tell your therapist. I mean, I found myself writing almost every day what that day felt like and trying to make it through deep grief. And so at that point, and for the next 6 months at least, I absolutely was carrying my tiger through CaringBridge, even though I did also have a therapist I saw every week.
So much to this story, Tony. So really, with Lynn looking over your shoulder on CaringBridge and all of these things, kind of all these writings and things kind of collected together and becoming source material for the book, really Lynn has helped you write this book.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One of the conclusions I reached towards the end of the book is that, and which I tried to document in the book with stories about things between me and Lynn over the years. Lynn, in many ways, changed me in many ways and made me very much the person that I am. I'm much more open than I was when I met Lynn, and my feelings were so much closer to the surface. And she'd been doing that to me for 25, 30 years. We'd been together 30 years when this all started. So she had been having that effect on me almost since the day we met. I mean, think about that crazy thing she said to me in the swimming pool.
Yeah.
She was just like, tell me what you're feeling. I would say at dinner, she'd say, how was your day? Or what? No, she'd say, what are you thinking? And I'd say, not much. Nothing. And she would say, that's impossible. You have to be thinking something. Tell me. This is from early on. So she taught me. And then later, what are you feeling? She brought all that out of me. I was much more closed in and more like, I will say, a normal guy.
Yeah.
And by the time this all happened, I was much more open, and she brought me that. as well as everything more literal about helping, looking at the posts and writing the posts and having so many friends that I had to communicate with on her behalf, who I eventually came to realize were my friends too.
Mm-hmm.
I started this journey thinking I had 10 friends and Lynn had 500, of whom many know me, and I'd had dinner with them many times. I'd known them for years, but I always thought of them as Lynn's friends.
Right.
And somewhere along the way, actually, I ran into one of them at a party once, or sometime, and he turned to me and he said, Tony, I feel like I'm really getting to know you from really reading The Caring Bridge. I've known you for 25 years, but I never knew you like this. And that's before the part with the deep grief and that's just the normal how I chose to share what was going on with us as we were going through hospitals and doctors and the various twists and turns of Lynn's treatment. And Lynn brought me that. And she making me write these things brought me that. And now I have, several hundred friends when before I thought I had 10.
For Carrying the Tiger, Tony, specifically for people that are in the caregiving role for a loved one through a journey like you've been on, whatever illness they're dealing with in their family, how will this book give light and encouragement and hope and support for someone who, like you, was supporting a loved one through something so traumatic and life-changing as this situation, this story that you have with Lynn? How will this book help somebody in that role?
I hope that it will help them in quite a few ways. First, I should say, the experience of reading the book is like looking over my shoulder while I go through these things. And I rarely pull back to say, oh, here's a lesson, or, oh, this is my conclusion about what's going on. But I have filled the book deliberately with examples of where we made choices and how they played out, with examples of what it actually felt like to us and things like my emotions. Because what I want people, I really hope that people reading this book will think about what they're going through and realize, first of all, and most importantly, that all of this is normal. That whatever, and the word normal is an odd word, whatever you are feeling, including like wanting your wife to die sooner rather than later now and then, despite loving her and trying to extend her life every minute, whatever you are feeling is absolutely normal. And that if you just keep going and attack each problem as it comes up, one at a time, without letting yourself get swamped by the emotions and the fear of the big picture, you can make a lot of progress and good things can happen. But having said that, it's also about appreciating, so many levels. It's about knowing that you need help. I want to say that early on. Knowing that caregiving is a huge job. I didn't realize that going in. We spent the first year, a lot of hard things happened in the first year, multiple procedures. I spent the first year trying to power through it. And I remember saying to myself again and again, you can do this, Tony. You can do this. Until I had a series of accidents, actually, which I feel were my body's way of telling me, no, Tony, you can't do this. One accident while riding my bike when I kept going in the pouring rain, when I shouldn't have, and ended up sliding at 30 miles an hour and breaking 3 ribs and being in the hospital for days. Another accident when there was steam coming out from under the hood of my car. And although I didn't open the radiator, I reached in and opened the cap for the water reservoir where you pour the liquid in, and it was full of steam, and I totally scalded my hand and was seeing a plastic surgeon for weeks. These are things that happen because you are intensely involved in caring for someone else to the extent that you stop noticing what's going on in your life. Later on, I lived with a hernia for a month before I realized that I had a hernia. Just ignoring these sensations because Lynn was in the hospital and we were worried about what was going to happen next. I ended up having a little breakdown. And sobbing on the bed, sobbing. I can't do this. Telling Lynn for the first time a year in, I can't do this. I can't do this. And letting out for her a lot of what I'd been experiencing and that I'd been afraid to tell her. Because I thought that if I revealed to her these things, she would get scared and feel that I was pushing her away and want to protectively back away from me. And quite the contrary, she actually wrapped her arms around me and pulled me to her and said, I understand, really I do. And then encouraged me to go find a therapist. You could find a grief group, you could find a therapist, but I needed someone I could talk to. And that was huge for me. So there are different ways to get help. You can ask friends for help, but you have to realize that doing this kind of huge job takes a huge toll on you. And if you are focused on helping your loved one, you may not realize what's going on in you until it's done a lot of damage to you.
If we go back in time in our conversation, Tony, you mentioned that Lynn would ask you, what are you thinking? What are you feeling? So for the caregivers listening to this conversation, to your point, it was like Lynn was saying to you in that moment again, what are you thinking? What are you feeling while you're caring for her, right?
Yes.
So for the caregivers, what are you thinking? What are you feeling? And then find someone to talk to those things about.
I think that's really important. But then I do want to mention, if you're open to it, there is in fact beauty and grace and joy all around you I say if you're open to it. When Lynn was in the hospital and bad things were happening and I was spending way more hours than I could afford to be by her side in the hospital and getting very little sleep, I was not noticing beauty, grace, and joy in the world. I was just trying to help make the best decisions, get the doctors to do the best possible job, get her out of there healthy. But in between, we came to realize how beautiful the world is, and we came to love each other, or to express our love to each other and acknowledge our love and the importance of it way more than we ever had before. And so this experience brought us that too. It brought us days and days of walking by the park when she was hobbling kind of, as spring came out and the buds came out, and we watched the buds come out day by day, leaf by leaf, in a way that we never had before. This brought us some, and we appreciated it. And this experience, this carrying the tiger, brought us these beautiful things. And then I think her hospice and dying was also beautiful. But hopefully most of the people who are doing caregiving are not eminently heading towards that. You can do very intensive caregiving. We had years between Lynn's first hard years and when she actually died. It didn't happen in 1 year. It does for many people, but it didn't. We had 5 or 6 years, and several of them were quite good. We got our lives back.
Did Lynn tell you how she wanted to be at home during this process? Was that something that you talked about earlier on in this journey? Like, how did that conversation happen?
That's a really good question, which I don't remember. I've remembered so many things during the course of writing this book. I remember when we talked about whether there was an afterlife and whether she believed in heaven, and that's in the book. But I don't remember when we explicitly said to each other, I want to die at home. It's just something we both knew.
Okay.
We may well have had conversations. There are a lot of things from those years that I didn't document and that haven't come back to me. Although many other things did come back during the course of iteratively writing and rewriting the book. I kept remembering more and putting more in. It was just really clear to us that if at all possible, we wanted Lynn to die at home surrounded by love. That was the goal. Most of those years, we did not think she was about to die. Right. We really did not realize. So things started going very wrong, and that played out over a period of months. More and more bad scans, the cancer growing, more things going wrong in her back. And we kept thinking, because 4 or 5 years earlier, we had had such good luck and gotten past some very difficult things and had more years of good life, we kept thinking and hoping that this would happen again. And then eventually we had to realize, which was very difficult and required an intervention. Intervention's the wrong word, but if our doctor hadn't called us at exactly the right moment and said, sometimes you have to say enough is enough, and this, I think, may be one of those times. If he hadn't called and said that to us, Lynn was going to go back into the hospital in 2 days for radiation and probably would never have come out. It's one of the most amazing things that anyone ever did for me was our oncologist calling up to say, maybe it's time to stop treatment. that is probably the only. Even 3 days before that, we were not talking explicitly about Lynn's dying. We talked about if she would die, maybe she'll die soon, but we kept hoping that all these symptoms could be pushed back for another year or two.
Right.
I don't know if I ever actually answered your question, but
it's good. The one thing I would love to touch on before we wrap up, Tony, is there's people listening to this conversation and maybe they're in a caregiving role, or they've just recently lost someone special to them, to whatever diagnosis or journey they've been on, and they're wrestling with what a lot of people talk about, survivor's guilt, where you would much rather it be you than them, and you hear the tragic accidents with a car accident or a plane or something, and there's one seat next to you, that person didn't make it, but you did, but you feel guilty that you're still here.
yes.
As a survivor, as a caregiver, walking a journey with somebody, did you wrestle then with survivor's guilt about moving on in life, new relationships, all of that? Did you have to wrestle with those feelings, with Lynn not being in a part of the conversation anymore?
I absolutely did. I had the illusion around the minute that she died, and for a day or two, that because we had been through so much together and I anticipated her death and she died beside me and it was a good death and we talked about it in the last days of her life, that because of all of that, somehow my grief would be easier than for other people, and it totally was not. If you love the person, all of those thoughts happen to you. I sobbed one night in the bathroom while trying to brush my teeth, saying, I wish I had died with you. This isn't fair. We should have gone together. When I did meet another woman, and Lynn encouraged me in the last days of her life to be willing to have another relationship. I was only in my 60s at the time, and quite healthy, and why not? I should have many years left. So she had even given me that permission and encouragement. And despite that, when for the whole first 2 years that I was having a relationship with another woman, I was terribly guilty. I felt terribly guilty, and it kept coming between me and my new partner, and it was very confusing and complicated, and that's a large part of what I write about in the last part of Carrying the Tiger, is trying to get through that. You don't really get past it. You learn to live with these feelings, and your life expands around them, and you have more experiences, and the grief and the complete confusion becomes less intense, but it was all there.
Interesting. I loved your approach to this book, Tony, and the fact that you're writing to 3 unique steps along this journey, and you're focused, and you bring us along on the journey. And the fact that you said it's like the reader's looking over your shoulder, in the same way that Lynn was looking over your shoulder as you read those posts, right? So it's like we get to take the place of Lynn in the story and kind of peek over your shoulder and watch these things happen in real time throughout the reading of your book. And I think that Lynn would be really proud of this. I think she would love to know that it's helping people and her story carries forward, and that the story doesn't end. It just continues, which is what I love. And I love the symbolism of the tiger. I think that is so unique and special. And I'm glad you waited for the inspiration for the title of the book and didn't just go with what was easy in the moment, but that you wrestled with that, and that you eventually, it just surfaced as the right title for this book. I think that's amazing. As someone who sees your book on a website, on a store shelf, and it's just another book in a sea of books, to understand the symbolism and the meaning behind the title of this book, I think that's really special for the reader.
Thank you. Thank you. That's all I could hope for.
Yeah. Where do you go from here, Tony? Like for you as a published author, congratulations. This is great. I know writing is part of your passion, and I know you love and you enjoy sharing your words that help and support people. Do you have a next chapter? That's the name of my podcast. Do you have a next chapter for you as an author now?
I'm easing my way towards it without fully knowing. I've been writing on Substack under the name Tony Stewart Author, which also, by the way, is the name of my website, TonyStewartAuthor.com. I've been writing pieces on Substack for about the last 6 months I mean, Carrying the Tiger consumed me for several years.
Yeah.
But eventually I reached the point that I wanted to write some new things. And so I've got something going there where every now and then I post a piece. And I'm kind of learning who I am as a writer and to an extent who I am as a person by writing these pieces. I just this morning published a piece there which is inspired by the woman who's in the hospital right now and posting on CaringBridge, but got me thinking about how being public with my book Carrying the Tiger has put me in touch with so many people who are reaching out to me. And I should say, as we record this interview, we're in pre-release. The book hasn't, the book isn't, by the time the interview airs, maybe it will be out. But so even in the pre-release stage, people who read an early draft or people who know about it are contacting me or in some way including me in their life to talk about or share with me the fact that they are grieving or the fact that they are living with cancer and going through these same struggles. Not asking for my advice, just sharing it. Because grieving people connect with each other. You do connect with other people who you think will understand what you're going through. And they're connecting with me because of this book. And it's changing me. It's way too soon to understand how this is changing me. But in the same way that all those years with Lynn, she changed me. It's clear to me, as of today, I literally pressed publish this morning on that piece. It is clear to me as of today that the experience of making this book public and talking about what we went through is changing me. And I kind of wonder whether I'll end up writing another book about that.
Interesting.
I have to live through it first.
Yeah. I love that you live through it in real time. And I always say that the best teachers are the best students. And someone who's learning in public brings people along for the journey. You don't have all the answers, but this is what I learned today.
Yeah.
And people can follow that journey along and feel like they're also learning in real time. Yeah. And you're just being humble and open and saying, I don't have the answer here, but this is what I'm dealing with today. And this is who I am and how I showed up today. I love that.
This is where I am. Exactly.
It's beautiful. Tony, you've already mentioned your website. We'll have a link to that in the show notes. What I'd love to do at the end here as we wrap up, thank you for being so kind with your time, is if I got out of the way and your ideal listener was sitting in a little cafe and you were able to walk up to them and have a conversation with them about this book, your love letter, like if you could summarize this book in its entirety as a love letter to a reader, what is your message to someone who's making the decision of this book for themselves, for a family member, a friend? What would you like to say to them as your message to the reader about this book?
I am still wrestling with trying to condense the complexity of this book into the one message. I think there are two or three. One is that beauty, grace, and joy are always with us, even at the hardest times, and sometimes because of the hardest experiences. Probably that's the main. But also, reading this book will give you tools and strength and confidence to go through something like this, even though what the specifics of your journey will be different from mine. But I wrote this in hopes that it will give you those specific tools by seeing what we went through and getting to think about it and getting to say, oh, when something like that happens to me, I'm going to be more prepared. Maybe I won't do what Tony did, but I'll be more prepared. And also the confidence that it can come out well, despite how horrible it seems. And also the belief that being able to hold someone's hand while they depart this world is not a tragedy, but it's actually a beautiful gift.
Amazing. Tony, thank you so much for being a part of this. And to you and to Lynn, thank you for sharing your story with us and that you're going to support and help many people on their journey. And I love, again, how your book is not just one of the three things that you cover, but you cover three things that are really unique to the story that's going to help a lot of people. So, Tony, thank you for taking a CaringBridge approach, carrying that tiger and putting it in a safe place, distant from us, and sharing a great story with us. Thank you, Tony.
You are very welcome. This has been a terrific experience.
Hey, thanks for listening to the podcast. Glad to have you here. I just want to let you know that you can always find out what we're doing live in the moment by going to our YouTube channel. Head over to livingthenextchapter.com. There'll be a link right there. Head over to our YouTube channel. Make sure you like, subscribe, do all the things that all the YouTubers love to say. And in our YouTube channel, a couple things. You're going to get advanced listens. You're going to get the episodes that we're working on in real time. So we record and post daily on our YouTube channel. I'd love for you to give us a follow over there. As well, we're making playlists. We have over 500 episodes. So finding the right episode for you, we're trying to group things into playlists. So if you like children's books, if you like business, you like historical fiction, we're grouping our authors together to make it a little easier for you to find your favorite next author. So head over to livingthenextchapter.com. And again, I'd love to hear from you. Hearing from the listeners of the show is great. And I just want to say thank you for being a part of the podcast family. And I look forward to having you back for the next episode. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate your time and your listen. Take care.